everyone doing tonight? You guys good? All right, first off, thanks everybody for coming. Every year, I share my testimony. Basically, I kind of recap what I learned this last year or this past season. So this year is just going to be talking about my last year with the Rockets. But before I start, I'm gonna fill you guys in on some background. I'm a Bay Area native. I grew up off Highway 101 in Palo Alto. Right by the In-N-Out Burger on Rainstorm. One of my favorite high school memories, me and my high school friends, we'd go to In-N-Out, get a double-double, maybe some fries, go to McDonald's, get a McFlurry, some apple pies. Then we go to Krispy Kreme, get some donuts. And it was kind of like the trinamic trio, and that was kind of one of my favorite things growing up. After that, I went to Harvard University, and then like you guys saw, I joined the Golden State Warriors with my first year in the NBA. So, who here is a Warrior fan? All right, who here is a Rockets fan? All right, I think next year I'm gonna share my testimony in Houston. No, it's all good. I was a Warriors fan growing up, so I totally know. I know what the Bay Area pride is all about. As many of you guys know, my first year in the NBA didn't really go well. It didn't go well at all. I hardly ever played, and I got sent to the D-League all 3 times. So basically what the D-League is the D-League stands for the Developmental League. It's like the minor league of the NBA. I remember when I first got sent to the D-League, my friend found out, he texted me and he was like, dang, they sent you to the D-League? You didn't even make the A, B, or C League? And I was like, no, that's not how it works. The D-League stands for Developmental League, so I'm just going to clear that right now. At the start of my second season, the Warriors cut me on the very first day of practice. The Houston Rockets picked me up. I showed up in training camp. There were 6 point guards when I got there. 12 days later, they waived me, and New York picked me up. And then on February 4th, 2012, everything changed. That night, I had my breakout game against the New Jersey Nets, and that game changed my life forever. I went from being cut twice in the same season to becoming the New York Knicks starting point guard overnight. I remember after the game, I was literally crying tears of joy. That's the first and only time it's ever happened where I've cried tears of joy. But I was crying tears of joy after that game. We went on to win 7 games in a row, and that's what everyone ended up calling insanity. And then that's when I started hearing all those Lin puns. My friends knew how much I didn't like it, so they'd always text me and say, wow, you're so intelligent, you're very incredible, or you're so inspiring. It was pretty annoying. But during Linsanity, I was setting NBA records. I was on the cover of Time magazine. I was given worldwide fame overnight. And I was literally the most trending person on the entire planet. At least until Psy started going down, which I'm not going to do right now. And to top it all off, I got a $25 million contract with the Houston Rockets. And you guys know how much I like to eat, so that comes out to 50 million apple pies. Someone really likes apple pie. As the 2012-2013 season started, I was supposed to be the cornerstone of the Houston Rockets rebuilding effort. I was supposed to be the new leader, the main guy to finally lead the Rockets back to the NBA playoffs. I was personally expecting to just come in, pick up where I left off, and I remember going on the plane ride over, and I was like, dude, I'm ready to invigorate the city of Houston. And when I got there, they had me on billboards across Houston. And I would drive by and be like, oh man, I look really cool. I was like doing some weird pose. But basically it was all reminders that I was supposed to save Houston basketball. And the most important thing was I was ready to show everyone that Linsanity wasn't over. But as I've seen many times in my life, what actually happened was nothing like what I had planned. First off, we signed James Harden. For those of you guys who don't know him, he's the guy with the big beard. He's my teammate. And when we signed him, I essentially went from kind of being the franchise player to kind of taking a back seat. And on top of that, I started the season playing terribly. Less than 10 games into the season, I started getting benched, and our backup point guards were playing more minutes than I was. And at this point in the season, my stats were significantly worse than the year before. The coaches were losing faith in me. Basketball fans were making fun of me. Journalists were criticizing me. And I remember I would go on Twitter, and my Twitter feed was filled with all types of hateful words, from overrated, overpaid, a flash in the pan, a bust, a nobody. That obviously didn't make me feel that great, and I became really, really frustrated, and I became really, really anxious. And on December 15th, 2012, I wrote in my diary, I have a diary. It's cool, diaries are manly. I had a diary, and I said, I'm tired and weary, and I can't wait for the season to end, and it's just begun. I haven't been able to eat as much or sleep as well recently, just tossing and turning in anxiety. What if I lose my spot as a starter? What if I have to be a backup the rest of the season? What happens if my backups are actually better than me? And at this point, I became so obsessed with being a great basketball player, living up to the expectations, living up to the contract, and just being a starting point guard. I remember I became so obsessed with trying to be Linsanity, being this phenomenon that took the NBA and the world by storm. Linsanity was supposed to be a breakthrough of some sort, where I went from being stuck on the end of the bench to being able to be free as an up-and-coming player on the court. And I remember Houston was supposed to be a fresh start for me. It was supposed to be a new beginning, a new journey. And I was supposed to be the go-to guy. But most of all, I was supposed to be joyful and free. But what I experienced was literally the opposite. I had no joy, and I felt no freedom. Because I felt chained to the world's lofty expectations. I felt like I had to carry the weight of the world on my own two shoulders. And that's why I wrote in my diary, that's why I couldn't really sleep or eat. And I remember I was no fun to be around, I was never smiling, I was never free. And before a game, we were about to play the New Orleans Hornets. I remember in my hotel room, I just kind of broke down in tears because I was so anxious about losing my starting position as a point guard. And at that point, I really had to self-reflect, and I had to ask myself, will I allow myself to listen to what everyone else has to say about me? Will I allow myself to be consumed by my performance on the court, to be consumed by my job? Because every day I was basing my self-worth on how many points I scored or how many games I started. I was basing my self-esteem on my ability to be the player that everyone else expected me to be. But my identity should never have been in basketball in the first place. And this is when God showed me I really needed an identity check. So what did I have to do? First, I had to reprioritize my life. I told myself, I'm no longer going to listen to everyone else's voice. And in fact, I'm not even going to listen to my own voice. I had to get back to listening to God's voice. I had to get back to being who God made me to be. In other words, I had to return to my identity as one of God's children, rather than trying to be Linsanity, which was an identity created by the world. So, my challenge to you today is this. Think about yourself. Who are you? What is your identity? That's why this event tonight is called Identity Unleashed. Because tonight, you need to find out what your identity is. And in order to know the answer to that question, you have to know what makes you the happiest or the most proud of yourself. You have to know what makes you the saddest or what makes you feel like you're not worth anything. You have to know what gives you your self-worth and your feeling of importance. For me, I couldn't find joy or feel important on any given day unless I played like Linsanity, unless I played well enough to drown out the voice of all the haters and to hear the praise of all my supporters. Everyone listens to a voice, and you need to know what voice you listen to. Because the voice you listen to the most is where your identity is. And so I want to ask you, whose voice do you hear the loudest in your life? It could be the voice of your peers, the voice of your parents, the voice of your boyfriend or your girlfriend. It could be the voice of your boss. Do you become extremely sensitive to criticism? Or do you become deflated when your boss critiques you or gives you a bad review? It could also be the voice of things that you want. It could be the voice of money, beauty, reputation, power. It could be the voice of your job or your schoolwork. Do you slave away at work or at school, desperate to get that promotion or to get into that one college to be able to validate yourself as a person? Which voice is the loudest in your life? If the voice you listen to the most isn't God's voice, then eventually you'll experience the same emptiness, confusion, and misery that I felt when I listened to the voice of insanity. And so today, I want to quickly address three of the strongest voices in society. Number one, money. Number two, worldly success. And number three, human approval. Let's start with money. In 1923, 9 of the world's richest people secretly met at the Edgewater Beach Hotel in Chicago, Illinois. If these 9 people combined their resources, they had more money than the entire US Treasury. One of these 9 was the president of the world's largest gas company, another was a presidential cabinet member, another was the head of the world's largest monopoly, the president of the New York Stock Exchange, so on and so forth. You would think from a surface level that these 9 people's lives were perfect, but this is how the story ends. By 1948, 27 years later after that meeting, 3 of the 9 died bankrupt. 2 were in prison for embezzlement and bribes. 1 went insane and died in an asylum, and 3 committed suicide. I would argue that none of these 9 people found joy because they were consumed by their money. Every single one of these 9 people could have easily taken their money, retired, and lived very, very comfortably. But they wanted more. And when the Great Depression hit, they either felt they needed to use illegal means to regain wealth, or their life was no longer worth living. If their identity wasn't tied to their money, do you think they would resort to stealing or suicide because of an economic depression? My guess is these people put their identity in their money, and they put their self-esteem and their self-worth in their wealth. 1 Timothy 6:10, for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. It doesn't say money is the root of all kinds of evil, but the love of money. In other words, to put your identity in money, or to be consumed by your money, is the root of all kinds of evil. Perhaps you think, if only I had more money, my life would be complete. I'm telling you right now, I have more money than I could have ever imagined. But I can honestly say, not once have I completely felt satisfied because I have X amount of money. And I truly believe there is no amount of money that will give you the joy, importance, or identity that you're looking for. The second voice I want to talk about is worldly success. What does society define as success? If I were to answer that question, I'd say, society teaches us when we're in high school, we gotta get the best grades. So we can go to the best college, get the best job. When we get that job, we need the best promotion, become the best in our line of work to earn the most money. When we have that money, we use that money to buy the best house, to buy the best cars, to buy the best gadgets. We find the best husband or the best wife, to have the best kids and the best family. And then what? You want more. You want your kids to get in the best high school, to get the best grades, so on and so forth. And we kind of laugh about it, but if you really think about it, it's true. And I want to pretend like we do have all that. Pretend like you have all that. Does your life all of a sudden become perfect, or do you all of a sudden become fulfilled? Sometimes people ask me, what did you learn the most from insanity? And my answer is never how many points I scored, or how awesome it is to be the world center of attention, or how satisfying my new contract is. The one thing I really learned from insanity was how empty fame and worldly success really are. And I learned that even when I had it all, it wasn't enough. Just 5 weeks after my breakout game against the Nets, I'm bringing back up my diary. I wrote in my diary, I'm slowly losing my happiness. I'm too focused on living up to this insanity stuff. During those 2 weeks in New York, I probably had more success and fame than anyone else in the entire world. But I just ended up wanting more. This past season, I wanted more. I wanted more stats, more wins, more fame, more success. I learned the emptiness of worldly success the hard way. Don't make the same mistake I did. Matthew 16:26 says, "What good will it be for a man if he gains the whole world, yet forfeits his soul?" I'm going to read that again. What good will it be for a man if he gains the whole world, yet forfeits his soul? Every day we're so focused on the things of this world, but do you ever stop and think about your soul? The one thing insanity taught me is not to put my identity in worldly success, because the desire for success can never ever be quenched. That's why I had to stop listening to the voice of success and start listening to the voice of God. The third voice I want to talk about is human approval. Bronnie Ware is a woman who worked in palliative care. I hope I'm saying that right. When people are diagnosed with a terminal disease, they often leave the hospital and they go back home to spend time with family because they know that their time on earth is coming to an end. Bronnie's job was to alleviate their suffering as much as possible during their final days on earth. So basically, she spent most of her days spending time with the dying. During this time, she had many, many conversations with her patients, and she ended up writing a book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. What do you think the number one most common regret was? The number one regret of the dying was living a life others expected of them. Are any of you here today living a life others expected of you? I was at the start of this past season. I wanted to be an insanity. I wanted to give all my fans a reason to cheer for me. I wanted to give all the haters a reason to stop criticizing me. I was living a life others expected of me, and I was living a life for human approval. Who do you seek your approval from? When you're on your deathbed, and to be totally honest, obviously I don't hope it comes true, but to be totally honest, that could be tonight, that could be any moment for any of us. Will you regret spending your life chasing human approval? Living a life everyone else expected you to live, trying to be accepted by everybody else? Now don't get me wrong, it's not sinful to have money, success, or human approval, but it is sinful to idolize them like I did with basketball this past year. Perhaps the more important question is, why do you want money, success, or human approval? Or how can you use those blessings, those talents, those resources that God has given you to serve Him and to serve other people? Because if your motivation and your heart is genuinely set on using everything you have for God's glory and not your own, then I'd say your identity is in Christ. I want you guys to think about God's blessings as if they come to us on a conveyor belt. So as we receive God's blessings, we pass them along to others. The Bible tells us to give because God first gave to us. As we receive God's love, we take that love, we pass it on to others. We love because God first loved us. As we receive money, we pass it on to others. But when we start storing up all these blessings, when we start storing up our money, when we start trying to hold on to every last thing, it creates a log jam on this conveyor belt. And everything starts to pile up. And not only are we not sharing God's blessings with others, but because we have so much stuff piled up, we can no longer see clearly. We can no longer see in front of us because our stuff is in the way. Our vision is clouded by our stuff. Our minds are consumed and our identities are put in our stuff. That's what happened to those 9 people in 1923, and that's what happened to me last season. This upcoming season might go great or it might go terribly. But either's okay, as long as I'm not consumed by basketball or the expectations of insanity. As long as I remember where my true identity is, and that's in Christ. So if you have money, Find ways to use it to serve the poor, the underprivileged, the marginalized, the rejects of society, the people who everybody else has given up on. Or find ways to serve the church. If you have worldly success, use it to glorify God. Use your fame, your work, your talents as a means to worship God and to inspire others to do so as well. That's what Tyler and the worship team did tonight. That's why they're here tonight. If you have human approval, use your friendships, your influence to proclaim the good news of Jesus or to humbly serve other people. That's why Francis Chan is here tonight. And if I could leave you guys with one thing, it would be to honestly evaluate your life, figure out what your purpose here on earth is, and to find out what your identity is in. And if it's not in God, I would strongly urge you to, at the very, very least, just find out what it means to put your identity in Him. Just take a small step of faith to get to know more about who God is, to be able to try and build a relationship with Him. Right now, Francis is going to come up, he's going to elaborate on this relationship with God, and he's going to give you an opportunity to find peace with God tonight. I pray that you listen very, very closely to what he says, because at the end of the day, it's the most important decision you'll ever make. And I'll be praying that tonight is the night